Kidarites, a group that ruled parts of Central and South Asia during the 4th and 5th centuries. You might have heard them referred to as the Kidara Huns. These folks were part of a bigger cultural mix, often called the Hunna in India or the Xiongnites in Europe, and they might have even been the same group as the Xiongnites mentioned in ancient texts. Pretty intriguing, right? Now, the Kidarites got their name from one of their key rulers, Kidara. According to Chinese records, his name was pronounced something like Chia Tala back then. The Kidarites were also known as the Red Huns, a nod to their connection with a larger network of nomadic tribes. They kicked off a major shift in Central Asia by establishing the first of several Hunna kingdoms, paving the way for others like the Alkan and the Hephthalites. Around 360 CE, the Kidarites emerged as a force in the region we now call Bactria, taking over territories previously controlled by the Sasanian Empire. By 390 CE, they were already expanding into northwestern India, where they took control of what was left of the Kushan Empire in Punjab. This wasn't just a random power grab. They were skilled at adopting and adapting to the cultures they encountered, which helped them establish a strong foothold in these regions. So, where did the Kidarites come from? They were a nomadic people likely originating in the Altai Mountains. On their coins, their rulers are often shown clean-shaven, a look typical of Altaic cultures at the time, which set them apart from the bearded rulers of Iranian cultures in the same area. It's possible that they spoke an early form of Oghuric before adopting the Bactrian language. Oh, and their coins often depict mounted archers, emphasizing their roots as horse-riding warriors. Another fascinating detail: the Kidarites practiced artificial cranial deformation, basically intentionally reshaping the skull as a cultural marker. It's a bit eerie but tells us how distinct their identity was. They were also closely tied to the Red Kashanites, a subgroup of the larger Chionite tribes, though debates still rage about the exact nature of these connections. Interestingly, a recently discovered seal shows a Kidarite ruler calling himself the King of the Huns and Great Kushan Shah, connecting their legacy to the Kushan Empire. Their leader, Kidara's name, might even have roots in a Turkic word meaning west, hinting that the Kidarites were originally the westernmost of their kind, before moving further into Central Asia. So, what drove them to migrate? One theory points to climate change in the Altai region during the 4th century, which might have forced many tribes to move. Another theory suggests pressure from other nomadic groups, like the War, pushed them westward. Whatever the reason, the Kidarites made their presence known as they migrated through regions like Transoxiana and Bactria. At one point, they were even vassals of the Kushans, adopting elements of Kushano-Bactrian culture. But they weren't content with playing second fiddle for long. They began pressing against the mighty Sasanian Empire, sometimes serving as mercenaries in their armies. One of their leaders, Grumbates, even fought alongside the Sasanian ruler Shapur II against the Romans. But alliances don't last forever. By the late 4th century, the Kidarites had turned the tables, becoming a serious challenge for the Sasanians. They eventually settled in Bactria and declared themselves the rightful successors of the Kushan Empire, minting coins and adopting imperial titles to back up their claim. Their capital was based in Samarkand, a hub of Central Asian trade. Unlike the barbarian stereotype often pinned on them by their rivals, the Kidarites had a well-organized administration and managed their territories efficiently. Evidence from coins and fortresses like Kafir Kala near Samarkand shows how advanced they were. And the Kidarites' move into northwest India marked a significant shift in their power dynamics. Having solidified their influence in northern Afghanistan, they expanded into regions like Peshawar and Gandhara between 390 and 410 CE. This expansion coincided with the transition from Gupta Emperor Chandragupta II to Kumaragupta I, suggesting a period of opportunity that the Kidarites seized. Likely driven by pressure from the rising Hephthalites and setbacks against the Sasanians. Economically, the Kidarites continued the legacy of the Kushans by issuing gold coins, but there was a clear decline in their output compared to the Great Kushans. These coins bore the Kidarite rulers' names while clinging to Kushan traditions through titles like Kushan. Early issues, such as those bearing the name Gandhara, hint at the complex political landscape, with the Kidarites acknowledging the influence of regional powers like the Kushano-Sasanians and even the Guptas. Over time, these coins gave way to the more prominent issues of Kidarite leaders like Kidara. Buddhism, remarkably, seemed to thrive under Kidarite rule. The Chinese pilgrim, Fa Xian, who traveled through the region around 400 CE, described a flourishing Buddhist culture. Artistic expressions from this period, such as the sculptures of Paitava, display a blend of traditional Gandharan styles with Zoroastrian influences introduced by the Kidarites, such as fire altars integrated into Buddhist imagery. This period also saw Indian cultural and religious ideas spreading as far as Sogdia, facilitated by the Kidarites' expansive rule. Conflict with the Gupta Empire was another key aspect of Kidarite history. The reign of Kumaragupta saw skirmishes with the Kidarites, which escalated during the rule of his successor, Skandagupta. Skandagupta's inscriptions vividly recount fierce battles against the Huns, likely referring to the Kidarites, whose invasions nearly toppled the Gupta Empire. Though the Guptas managed to repel these attacks and regain some stability, the conflicts took a toll. Trade routes were disrupted, and the economic strain was evident in the reduced quality and quantity of Skandagupta's gold coinage. Meanwhile, the Sasanians were also grappling with the Kidarites. The early Sasanian rulers, including Yazdegerd Asi and Bahram Bey, had to endure the humiliation of paying tribute to the Kidarites. However, this uneasy arrangement fell apart under Yazdegerd II, leading to open conflict during the reign of Perroz I. The Kidarites initially gained the upper hand, even tricking and humiliating Sasanian forces. Perroz, however, managed to turn the tide by allying with the Hephthalites. Together, they defeated the Kidarites in 466 CE, with Perroz reasserting control over key regions like Bactria and celebrating his victory with new coinage modeled on Kidarite designs. By the late 5th century, the Kidarites' influence had waned. The Alkan Huns, possibly a branch of the Hephthalites, began encroaching on their territories, eventually overtaking Gandhara and other Kidarite strongholds. Despite this, traces of Kidarite presence lingered in areas like Jammu and Kashmir, where local rulers issued debased coinage under their name. The Kidarites' decline created a power vacuum in India, paving the way for the Alkan Huns to dominate the region. Interestingly, the struggles of the Kidarites mirrored those of the Huns in Europe, where Attila's campaigns faced fierce resistance from the Romans. While the Huns in the west saw their power collapse after their defeat at the Catalonian plains, the eastern Hunnic tribes, including the Kidarites, left a more lasting mark on the Gupta and Sasanian empires, weakening them significantly. Even in their decline, the Kidarites left behind a legacy that persisted in unexpected ways. In eastern Sogdiana, remnants of their culture and influence survived, possibly forming a connection to the Principality of Ushrusana. Names and titles like Kidar and Afshan, which were popular among the rulers of Ushrusana, suggest a lingering Kidarite influence, bridging their history with the evolving dynamics of Central Asia.